All right, let's jump into this next story. This comes from Outdoor Life. This is from Dak Collins, and it was updated on January 17th. Colorado cancels April mountain lion season amid anti-hunting opposition. So let's get into this one here. So Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission voted last week to cut back on mountain lion hunting by canceling the April hunting season and outlawing the use of electronic calls statewide. These changes passed through the Colorado's current mountain lion season, fell well within CPW's harvest goals, and the CPW's wildlife biology point to growing and healthy population of lions in the state. Thanks to decades of closely regulated hunting, the new rules will impact the current season when they go into effect March 1st. Colorado has traditionally held its primary mountain lion hunting season from late November through March and a second season during the month of April in certain units. CPW spokesperson Bridget O'Rourke confirmed in an email to Outdoor Life that the commission's decision was reached unanimously. She says the rules change made sense because the low harvest numbers during the April season and the use of electronic calls were not contributing to much of the overall statewide harvest. So this, I want to draw attention to almost immediately. If the electronic calls weren't making a significant impact to the harvest numbers, and if that April season was not a heavily hunted season or many harvests were being taken during the April season, why do they need to cancel it? Why cut out that potential opportunity for hunters to go out there and hunt? I have a suspicion as to why that is, but let's get into the article a little bit further. Outdoor Life goes on to say it's unclear how much these rules changes will affect mountain lion hunters in different parts of the state. Electronic calls were already outlawed in all but 2 Pacific management units, and an outfitter in the Western Slope tells Outdoor Life that it's been years since hunters have had April season in his area. They go on to say, still, the timing and reasoning behind the commission's January 11th decision were concerning to Colorado hunters. Changes to hunting and fishing regulations always draw some level of skepticism from sportsmen, but Colorado's hunting community remains on high alert due to some recent shifts surrounding wildlife management there. Kind of like the reintroduction of the wolves. Last July, Governor Jared Polis appointed 3 new members to the state's Park and Wildlife Commission, whose background were more grounded in animal rights than traditional wildlife management. There's the kicker. So we're getting potential for certainly animal rights activists, and more than likely, probably anti-hunters in the Parks and Wildlife Commission making decisions regarding hunting. Then in September, anti-hunters filed a highly controversial ballot initiative that would outlaw mountain lion hunting statewide. So certainly a strong push from anti-hunting groups and animal rights members on the Parks and Wildlife. Starting to see a bit of a connection here. Some defenders of regulated hunting worry that the state's Parks and Wildlife Commission could be trying to appease anti-hunters and non-hunting public while ignoring science that has traditionally grounded or guided wildlife management decisions in Colorado and elsewhere. See again, right back to the always the argument. The anti-hunting groups are not following the sound science from the wildlife management organizations, as well as not listening to the biologists and looking at the healthy the populations and how hunting affects those populations. Always playing on emotion, not following the facts. To make the joke, they're not following the science. O'Rourke says this is far. So let's go back. I'll read this sentence again here. Some defenders of regulated hunting worry that the State Parks Wildlife Commission is trying to appease anti-hunters and non-hunting public while ignoring science that has traditionally guided wildlife management decisions in Colorado and elsewhere. O'Rourke says this is far from the case. Is it though? Of the 11 public comments that were heard during January 11th meeting, 5 opposed the regulated hunting of lions, while 6 were in support of it. Okay, so certainly a strong opposition. But what's the reason for opposing the hunting season? Why? That's what I'd like to know. Multiple supporters encouraged the commission to include a gender breakdown in CPW's harvest reports so that hunters could better self-regulate the number of females they take. Other supporters voiced their disappointment over the loss of April hunting season, which they say is one of the best times of the year to train hunting dogs. There's another kicker. Anti-hunting groups are very much against hunting with dogs or utilizing dogs for hunting practices. So one supporter went on to say, nearly everything we know about lions as a species is thanks to the studies that have been done with lions caught using dogs. But it takes several years, hundreds of hours, and hundreds of miles to make a well-trained dog. April is by far one of the best months for training due to the array of different weather conditions and melting snow. The loss of the April season, the loss of the April season is a loss for hunting, as well as biologists and wildlife managers depend on these dogs. Which I think this reporter has a point here. To my understanding, one of the really the best ways or only ways that are really being utilized to be able to truly to survey mountain lions is the use of dogs to treat them, so that again biologists can study them and basically to take samples, whatever they're going to do to survey the population. Article goes on to say hunting advocates also pointed out the relatively small impact that hunters have on cougar populations, which is often blown out of proportion by those who want to see mountain lion hunting banned outright. They go on to say this broad vilification of hunters is already underway when CPW's commissioners met for the first meeting of the year in Denver last week. Just one day before the meeting began, Cats Aren't Trophies, an advocacy group that's behind the proposed mountain lion hunting ban, issued a sensationalized press release claiming that mountain lion trophy hunters in Colorado are outpacing the yearly average for killing females, even though the 2023 or the 23-24 hunting season is far from over. The group noted that hunters have already killed 276 lions as of January 9th, with 198 of those taken during the first month of the season. Outdoor Life goes on to add in as well. That number had increased to 367 lions as of January 17th, according to CPW's harvest report, which is updated daily. However, data from previous hunting seasons shows that these numbers fall in line with past harvest numbers. Most importantly, the cougars already taken by hunters this season represent just over half of CPW's 23-24 harvest quota of 674 animals. The agency cap during the 2021-22 season was 634 lions. Hunters killed 486 that season, well below the threshold to ensure mountain lion population remains healthy. The agency recorded similar harvest numbers during 22-23 season, according to O'Rourke. So again, not following the science. So basically the wildlife managers set out, hey, these are the quotas of the number of mountain lions that can and should come off the landscape to ensure that the population is remaining healthy, not overpopulated, and does not pose any detriment to any of the other wildlife within the area. So that additional April season, as well as the use of as well as use of those electronic calls, is simply a management tool. The biologists and wildlife managers are looking to have a certain number of animals taken off the landscape, one way or the other. So O'Rourke goes on to say, the number of lions harvested up to this point in the 23-24 season isn't any different than recent averages. CPW sold approximately 2,500 licenses per year on average over the past 3 years. 2022-23 hunting season, there were 2,599 mountain lions licenses sold, and 502 lions were harvested during the whole season, resulting in a 90% success rate. Again, just like any other season. Just because you have hunter participation doesn't mean that all those hunters are harvesting. Again, very low success rate. CPW's Carnivore and Fur Bear Program Manager Mark Ferreira gave a presentation during the meeting, during which he corrected some of the claims made by CAT's press release. Ferreira clarified that mountain lion hunting is heavily regulated in Colorado and that the harvest limits are set according to population estimates in certain hunting units. CPW keeps close eye on these harvests and closes units when hunters reach set quotas. Again, you're not going to see an overharvest of these mountain lions because of how closely regulated it is. Mark goes on to say, our lion harvest has been around 500 for the last 5 years. In terms of seasonal harvest, Colorado is one of the most restrictive regulations. We tend to front load our harvest from late November into December and early January. There are a lot of reasons for that, including the opening day push, when more folks are out, snowfall, and closure of units after harvest limits have been reached. Ferrer also called attention to CAT's claim that hunters are harvesting more females than usual, since the special interest groups pointed out that 111 of the 198 mountain lions killed between November 27th and December 27th were female. The group called this unsustainable. Ferrer pointed out that during most seasons, approximately 40% of the overall harvest is made up of female lions. However, he explained that more than half of those females are typically sub-adults, which are too young to breed and have little to no impact on the overall population. Again, listening to the experts on this, they're indicating that yes, even though there are a lot of females being harvested, which would typically, in many, game management, systems, if they're wanting to cut down on the female or on the population overall, you target the females. But he's indicating that most of these females that are being harvested are not even breeding anyways, so it has little to no impact on the population itself. It goes on to say, and that the population is thriving. The CPW currently estimates there are between 3,800 and 4,400 mountain lions in the state, and that number has grown since 1965 when CPW started managing cougars as big game. Again, it's key. They started managing them with hunting. Barrera spoke proudly of this management work and called the last 50 plus years of regulated mountain lion hunting in Colorado a conservation success story. Who'd have thought? Again, this goes back to the North American model of conservation. It is the best program for managing wildlife, I would argue, in the world. Barrera also closes out by saying, all former observations point to a growing, healthy, and increasingly stable population of lions in recent decades. See, he even points out they are growing. So the numbers are increasing. So hunters are not decreasing the number of mountain lions. It's still growing despite hunting efforts. And by using scientifically supported management thresholds, CPW can provide for lion harvest as a management tool while also having a very robust population of lions on the landscape. Ferreira said Thursday, this is not one or the other. These two conditions are not mutually exclusive. See, again, you can manage the population and have it be healthy, which again, otherwise, again, if the alternative is you're going to have overpopulation, which can lead to an imbalance on the landscape, which is going to cause a ripple effect throughout the entire ecosystem. And then the self-correction that nature does is usually much more drastic and violent than overall to the whole program. And then the article closes out by saying, aside from shortening this year's season and tightening up the prohibitions around electronic calls, the wildlife commissioners did not make any other rule changes that would affect mountain lion hunters in Colorado. However, as the debate around big cat hunting heats up in Colorado, sportsmen and other supporters of science-based predator management, again, key, science-based predator management, should keep showing up to meetings. So again, I like how they end this article with a call out that hunters need to show up to these meetings. They need to be in communication with these wildlife management groups so that they know basically our side of the story. Kind of like what they're saying in that meeting. There's an anti-hunting group or animal rights groups that are very organized, and they make sure they are present for these meetings. They are heard during these meetings, and we need to counteract that. Again, backing the basically being a representative of the North American model of conservation, showing the facts that this is working, and that if these people want to keep these animals on the landscape, they need to make sure they follow those the time-tested practices that the U.S. has implemented for decades. Hunters aren't going to go back to the market hunting days and hunt animals to extinction anymore. We want these animals on the landscape just as much as anyone else. In fact, we probably want them on the landscape even more so. Look at any wild or any game species out there. There are multiple, conservation groups, nonprofits, clubs, everything like that are there to support both the population, the habitat, putting funding towards researching, and honestly, for anyone that is not a hunter that cares about any particular animal, you want that animal to be made a game species. Basically by having hunters, as your partner and ally in that regard, there's no better group to ensure the long-term success of a particular animal. Again, that's my opinion in that regard. But again, you have to look at the North American model of conservation. You have to look at the management, wildlife managers that are studying these animals, maintain these surveys, and we as hunters have to work with them. Otherwise, again, the anti-hunting group is very strong, very prominent, and they are not going to stop with just mountain lion hunting, just hunting with dogs, just hunting with electronic calls. They will not stop until they close hunting in any means across the country.